News Alert. Breaking tonight, the president's attorney sounding off on Robert Mueller. Also standing by White House counsel Don McGahn after this weekend's report saying that McGahn has cooperated extensively with the special counsel investigation. And scorned former CIA Director John Brennan mulls a lawsuit over his security clearance getting revoked. And the president says, bring it on. Also tonight, President Trump honors immigration enforcement officials at the White House, calling out Democratic leadership as open border extremists. Senator David Perdue was at today's event. He joins us live to talk about the Abolish ICE movement and whether the Senate really will work all the way through the August recess. Plus, we'll speak exclusively to a former Miss America as pageant leadership's under fire for manipulation and bullying. Nearly 24 former Miss Americas want the whole board of directors to resign. Hello and welcome to Fox News at Night. I'm Shannon Bream in Washington. In a new bombshell interview with Reuters news agency, the president says he would be, quote, totally allowed to get involved in the Mueller investigation, but he's decided not to for now. Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry leads off our coverage with some breaking news tonight. Good evening, Ed.
Shannon, great to see you. I just spoke to a top advisor of President Trump who told me what is new about all of these big developments tonight is the president finally seems to be leaning against ever doing an interview with special counsel Robert Mueller. This advisor telling me that after weeks of suggesting he'd like to sit with Mueller to convince him he did nothing wrong, it is finally sinking into the president that his lawyers, Rudy Giuliani and Jay Sekulow, that have been saying that it would be a no-win situation for him to go in with Mueller, and that's finally sinking in with the president. The president's saying in a new interview tonight, if Mueller finds conflict between what the president and former FBI Director James Comey, for example, say about the handling of the probe of retired General Michael Flynn, that could be a perjury trap. The president telling Reuters, quote, even if I am telling the truth, that makes me a liar. That's no good. That may be a more artful way of saying, quote unquote, the truth isn't the truth. The phrase Giuliani was lampooned for using yesterday on NBC's Meet the Press. While there are fresh reports in the Washington Post and the New York Times that Giuliani and the rest of the president's legal team simply don't know what White House counsel Don McGahn said when he spent 30 hours talking to Mueller's investigators at the president's direction, which we should add, Giuliani pushed back in an interview with Fox tonight, telling our Martha McCallum that he has found out what McGahn said, and there was nothing, Giuliani says, that implicated the president in either collusion or obstruction of justice. Watch.
I knew not to worry about it because if the president had said anything criminal to the counsel of the White House, McGahn wouldn't be there now. McGahn, as a matter of legal ethics and possibly even law, would have to quit. And he's a very ethical guy. I mean, he's a very careful guy. So I can't imagine sitting around the White House for 6 months with a president who he thinks committed a federal crime. It would be outrageous.
Meanwhile, the president declined to say when Reuters asked if he may strip the security clearance of Mueller, who has one as well, Shannon.
Well, and Ed, the president tweeting just in the last few minutes, he's actually thinking about stripping more security clearances. Who else is at risk potentially? Yeah,
he just tweeted in the last few moments that maybe Philip Mudd, a CNN analyst, a former Intel official, got into a fiery exchange a few nights ago on CNN about security clearances and whether or not former officials are profiting from them. The president tweeting a few moments ago that maybe Mudd should have his clearance stripped. He's left open the possibility that Bruce Ohr at the Justice Department could be stripped as well. This, of course, coming after John Brennan last week was stripped of his security clearance. Brennan on NBC's Meet the Press yesterday suggested he may take legal action against the president. Watch.
If that's the price we're going to pay to prevent Donald Trump from doing this against other people, to me, it's a small price to pay. So I am going to do whatever I can personally to try to prevent these abuses in the future. And if it means going to court, I will do that.
Okay, Giuliani today dared Brennan to file a suit, calling him a political hitman, champing at the bit at the idea that the president's legal team could launch discovery on Brennan's emails that could reveal more about how the dossier, for example, was put together. Shannon?
All right, Ed Henry, thank you.
Thank you.
For more, let's bring in National Security Attorney Bradley Moss and former DOJ counsel Jamil Jaffer. Thank you both for coming in tonight. Good to see you.
Of course, absolutely.
Okay, so let's start with that last soundbite we heard from former CIA Director Brennan there on Sunday. me, he sounded a little bit like a martyr. Like, I'm being pulled through the mud. If it's the price we're going to have to pay to stop Donald Trump, I'm willing to do it. Jamil, is there a legal precedent for somebody suing over a security clearance in this specific situation?
Well, the situation is sort of unprecedented, and so no specific legal precedent on point with this kind of case, but a lot of precedent on point that says the president has a pretty broad authority to revoke or deny clearances. And so he would be facing an uphill battle if he could even bring the claim successfully. It's unlikely he'd be able to do it at the end of the day.
What are the odds of success? Because we've heard the New York Times hinting at, well, maybe he just goes for a defamation claim, a personal claim against the president.
Yeah, and that wouldn't work either, because the president would hold immunity in his context as serving as in the office of the president. And what Jamil was saying was right in terms of all the existing precedent would more or less fall on the side of the president here. But all of that precedent always considered the possibility, always had a situation where the regular process was applied. It went through the executive order. Appeal rights were afforded, or the national security exception in the executive order was invoked. We've never had this situation where a president just did it on his own. There's no process, no outline of what the concerns specifically were. He just unilaterally revoked it. And so we don't know how the court would truly view this.
What about this issue, though, of the president and his team suggesting, great, if you do this, then we get discovery and we'll go back through your emails and find out how much you're getting paid to be on these different shows and all these other things. I mean, do you think that's enough to scare someone like John Brennan away from this?
I don't think so. I mean, John Brennan has shown himself to be fairly political in this environment. So if John Brennan thinks he's got some either merit to his claim or an argument to just continue the story, because there are reasons for both sides. Some said the president wants the story to continue and think that that benefits him. Brennan clearly thinks it benefits him because he's, as you could see, last night or tonight, sort of playing the role of the martyr. So it's unclear how this thing really plays out, because both of them seem to think that continuous conversation makes a lot of sense for both of them.
Okay, in the meantime, we had this report on White House counsel Don McGahn that he has spent extensive time talking with special counsel. Nobody in the White House seems to be openly very upset about it or worried about it. It's not like they didn't know. In fact, the Wall Street Journal and an editorial board piece says this: Mr. Trump had to waive executive privilege for Mr. McGahn to cooperate with Mr. Mueller. Mr. McGahn cooperated only after Mr. Trump waived any privilege claim. This isn't what you'd expect if Mr. Trump is leading a cover-up. Bradley?
Well, partially also some of the additional reporting has indicated they thought they could retroactively take it back. This is something that Steve Bannon used to talk about, that you were going to somehow try to pull back the privilege after the fact. You can't do that once the cart's already out of the horse. I messed up that anyways. The point being...
We know what you're saying. Like, once you sit down and start answering questions, you waive the privilege, and you're not going to then suddenly say, wait, I can't answer that. I mean, The president gave him permission and said, I want everybody to, because I have nothing to hide.
Exactly. And here comes the problem. He relied on that prior guidance. We don't know what his original lawyers truly knew about the situation. They let Don McGahn talk for 30 hours. Even if Don McGahn didn't say something incriminating, even if he didn't say the president, exceeded his authority here, he gave Bob Mueller's team extensive factual context to go with all the other details they had, all the other documentation, all the other emails, to provide a narrative, a story of how these different choices were made. And that's going to be relevant in the obstruction angle.
But doesn't it also help the argument against forcing the president to sit down and testify with Mueller? Because if Don McGahn has been with him for 30 hours and given him every possible feeling and scenario and fact that he could provide, isn't it good for now the president's legal team to say, you could get this information elsewhere, you probably have it, you have no reason now to talk to the president?
Well, I think that's actually part of it. I think the other piece of it, Shannon, is the president is realizing, well, what about what Don McGahn said? What happens if what I say, forget being at odds with what Jim Comey says, what if it's at odds with my own White House counsel? I think that might be what's moving the president tonight to decide, and take the advice of his lawyers, which have been consistent for a while, which is don't go before the special prosecutor. That would be a train wreck for the president.
Well, and tonight, people now connected to Don McGahn are saying, they fully debriefed the president's legal team at the time. They have since talked to Giuliani and these other folks who were part of defending the president. They're saying he didn't say anything incriminating and there's nothing to worry about.
What else are they going to say at this point? They already, everything, all the details are out. He's already provided 30 hours worth of testimony. And as Jamil was saying, I mean, look, all this information is here. If Don McGahn's statements and all the testimony from all these other individuals conflicts with the president, that would be one more reason for him not to sit down, because that's a mountain of evidence against whatever the president recalls from those details. That's where perjury becomes a problem.
All right, another legal issue. I want to talk to you guys about Judge Brett Kavanaugh, who is the nominee to join the Supreme Court, take Anthony Kennedy's seat after his retirement. He's now starting to meet with some some heavy hitters. He met on the Democratic side. He met with Dianne Feinstein today. And also these things are coming up, these memos that were released by the National Archives from when he worked in the Bush White House, when he worked with Ken Starr then about the questions that he was posing for then President Bill Clinton. They were very graphic, and some people are going after that. But the fact is, if that conduct wasn't at question, would he have to be drafting those questions? Here's what Brian Fallon says, former Hillary Clinton campaign. He says, it sure is odd how Kavanaugh had such detailed questions in mind for Bill Clinton, but now apparently thinks it is improper for a president to even be asked about foreign meddling in our elections. What a politically convenient change of heart. Maybe that's why Trump picked him. Jamil, fair?
I mean, ridiculous. I mean, obviously, Brett Kavanaugh was a lawyer, worked for the special counsel at the time, the independent counsel at the time. He had a job to do. He was doing his job. There's nothing to see here. Everyone's known he worked for the Whitewater investigation for years and years and years, long before he was a judge on the D.C. Circuit. This idea somehow that this is new news or that he might ask tough questions, he's a good lawyer. That's what you expect a good lawyer to do. And by the way, this idea somehow that he doesn't want the president to ask questions, he's never said that. There's no evidence to support that. That's a ridiculous statement.
All right, and Radlene, we know he's going to go on to meet now, we think, in the next day or two with the top Democrat in the Senate, Chuck Schumer, who has said, I'm going to put these tough questions to him. I'm going to make him answer why we can't have these documents and when we're getting them. Does that work with the nominee? How does this work?
I mean, look, it can't. And I actually agree with Jamil here. This is just a lot of politics at play. It's coming up right before the election. This is a particular nominee who's going to almost certainly, if there's ever a subpoena fight, going to have to address these questions of the scope of the special counsel's authority and consider in the context of his original premise, his original points 20 years ago. I mean, I had to read those memos and wash my eyes out with soap, trying to remember what we were dealing with 20 years ago. But it's going to be a significant type of concerns, again, about misuse of authority and abuse of power.
Well, we've already had some Democratic senators say that they expect Judge Kavanaugh, if he becomes Justice Kavanaugh, to recuse himself from any case that would reach the high court from the Trump administration. Highly doubt that's going to happen. Nobody can recuse a justice but themselves. So we'll see if it happens. Great to see you both tonight. Come back soon.
Actually, happy to.
All right, our the top story tonight, in sharp contrast to the Democrats' new rallying cry, some of them, to abolish ICE. President Trump honors the country's top immigration and border enforcement agencies with a special White House ceremony today. Correspondent Garrett Tenney has more on just how heated this topic has become. Good evening, Garrett.
Shannon, good evening to you. The White House wanted to send a very clear message today that, unlike a growing number of Democrats, this administration fully supports our immigration enforcement agencies and the work they do to keep us safe. At the Salute to the Heroes event, President Trump honored the men and women of ICE and Customs Border Protection and blasted Democrats who want to abolish ICE.
You're incredible people. You do an unbelievable job. You're not appreciated enough. Any politician who puts criminal aliens before American citizens should find a new line of work, because it's not going to work. It's not going to work.
The president believes immigration is a winning issue for Republicans in the midterm elections, and he used today's event to go after Democrats, once again claiming they are weak on crime and want open borders.
We're building the wall step by step, and it's not easy because we have a little opposition called the Democrats. I guess they just don't mind crime. They don't mind crime. It's pretty sad. And I think we're going to have much more of a red wave than what you're going to see as a phony blue wave. A blue wave means crime. It means open borders. Not good.
This past weekend, it wasn't just Democrats going after ICE, though. Media outlets went wild when they learned ICE agents arrested an illegal immigrant from Mexico who was on the way to the hospital with his pregnant wife. The one detail they initially got left out of those headlines, though, apart from it being a scheduled C-section, is that the man is wanted for murder, and Mexican prosecutors had asked the U.S. for help tracking him down. This afternoon, the acting deputy director of ICE defended the arrest.
This person was wanted by foreign authorities for murder. This was a referral that we got from Interpol for a wanted person. We did surveillance to find out where they lived, and when that individual left their home, we made a vehicle stop. None of the ICE officers that made that arrest did anything wrong.
While a lot of progressives are calling for ICE to be abolished, many moderate Democrats are worried those efforts could backfire and hurt the party's chances of retaking the House in November. And that is something that the president and Republicans agree on as well. Shannon?
All right, Garrett Tenney, thank you very much. Well, the president also predicting today that immigration will be the major issue separating the two parties in the November elections. As critics say, he's using law enforcement officers for inappropriate political purposes. Well, Georgia Republican Senator David Perdue was at today's event and won the praise of President Trump. He joins us now live. Great to have you with us, Senator.
Great to be here, Shannon.
Okay, I want to play a little bit more of what the president had to say today. Here's a bit of what he had to say about the folks who are saying don't cooperate with federal immigration and don't, well, it's time to abolish ICE. Here's what he says.
It's just a small group that gets a lot of publicity because they have no courage, they have no guts, they just have big, loud mouths, and we don't want to put up with that. And I just want you to know that you're loved.
Is the president playing politics with this?
I really don't think so. When you hear him talk privately, this is an impassioned president. You saw it a little bit today publicly. The message today was very clear. We have your backs. We appreciate what you do.
Well, the Washington Post said this. They were quoting somebody who was formerly an acting ICE director, John Sandweg. He said, they rolled out the red carpet for ICE, and there's something to be said for morale, because he admits that it is helpful. He says, but you're doing it in a way that politicizes it. It's going to take years of work to reform ICE's reputation. They could be tarnished forever as a tool of the far right. Is that a
Well, I just don't see that. I mean, the Democrats have taken such an extreme position in this that's not in line with most Americans' viewpoint. I mean, we have a candidate for Attorney General in New York right now talking about putting suits up against ICE.
And you know what, when you say that, I want to go ahead and play this so people will see it for themselves. This is part of her video talking about that.
As Attorney General, I will continue to speak out against ICE. I will prosecute ICE for their criminal acts. And as AG and as a candidate for AG, I feel like it's really important to speak out to abolish ICE.
Well, I said that's really an un-American position today when I was asked that question. And it seems to me that, you know, what we got is somebody like that, and the people calling for the abolishment of ICE, they're more worried about the people who perpetrate the crimes against Americans than they are protecting Americans. That's potentially the top law enforcement person in New York talking about the rights of the criminal, not the rights of the victims.
Well, what do you make about all these different localities where we have seen them protesting, not wanting to help ICE, these encampments, Occupy ICE, you know, setting up in places like Portland and other places where people actually were very fearful about trying to get to and from work and just do their jobs?
Well, look, the president knows that sanctuary cities have to go. This is an abomination. First of all, he made a point today that we are a country of laws. His first responsibility is to protect American citizens and protect and defend the Constitution. He takes that very seriously. So today you saw a very energized, impassioned, and emotional president at one point about this.
And we're seeing more of you guys, you senators here in August in D.C. We're not used to that. I know you really pushed hard for it last year. Are you guys going to get some substantive things done this August?
Well, we hope so. I mean, we are right now in a position we haven't been in 15 years where we're taking up a bill this week, labor and HHS, that we haven't done that in 15 years. We haven't passed all of the appropriation bills in over 20 years, Shannon. So we're staying here in August trying to do two things. One is to go after the nominees. We have over 300 nominees right now waiting for confirmation. This is the height of Democratic obstructionism. It's historic, really. And the second reason we're here is to try to get all these appropriation bills funded before September 30th.
Well, I know there's a big push to return to what's called regular order with those funding bills, and you've got that Supreme Court confirmation coming up in September as well. So thanks for making a stop here.
No, it's always good to be here, Shannon. I love this.
Good to see you. All right, when we return, the current Miss America and almost 24 former Miss Americas calling for the pageant's board and director Gretchen Carlson to resign over claims of bullying.
All of the leadership, to include the board of directors, is complicit in this. And in order for us to move forward and to actually heal, we need to do the right thing.
Joining us live, Miss America 2011, Teresa Scanlon. She is one of those calling for the resignations, talks to Fox News at Night exclusively in just minutes. Plus, later on, he's one of the biggest conservative voices across radio and social media. Dennis Prager joins us with stunning new claims about censorship. Now, Facebook says it's all just a big misunderstanding. We'll bring you both sides when Dennis joins us live. This is a Fox News alert. Brand new chilling revelations tonight in the case of a Colorado man accused of killing his pregnant wife and 2 young daughters. An arrest affidavit released today says Christopher Watts was having an affair and that he claims his wife strangled their 2 daughters shortly after he asked for a separation. He told authorities that then sent him into a fit of rage, and then he strangled his wife. Christopher Watts was charged with 9 felony counts, including 3 first-degree murder charges. Well, Miss America Cara Mund is accusing pageant leadership of manipulation and bullying. And tonight, a growing number of former Miss Americas are coming forward in support of Mund, and they're calling for the resignation of the pageant's entire board of directors. Trace Gallagher is on the case. Good evening, Trace.
Good evening, Shannon. In just a matter of weeks, this has gone from back-channel grumblings within the pageant to accusations and allegations being laid out in the national media. The tipping point likely came Friday when the reigning Miss America Cara Mund wrote and released a 5-page letter saying she'd been bullied by pageant CEO Regina Hopper and chairwoman Gretchen Carlson, a former Fox News anchor. Cara Mund wrote in part, quoting, "Our chair and CEO have systematically silenced me, reduced me, marginalized me, and essentially erased me in my role as Miss America in subtle and not so subtle ways on a daily basis." She goes on to claim she's been left out of interviews, not invited to meetings, and called the wrong name. But last night, Gretchen Carlson hit back at Cara Mund on Twitter, quoting, "Actions have consequences." Friday, as an organization, we learned that $75,000 in scholarships, which would have been the first scholarship increase in years, is no longer on the table as a direct result of the explosive allegations in your letter. Carlson did not explain exactly how the scholarship money was lost, and before her tweet was fully absorbed in the social media bloodstream, a petition with 20,000 signatures, 27 state organizations, and 21 former Miss Americas were calling on Carlson and CEO Regina Hopper to step down. 3 former Miss Americas also called out Carlson today on NBC and ABC. Watch.
This person has taken no responsibility for the way she's treated our current Miss America. For Cara Mund to write a 5-page letter explaining for her through her year how she's been treated is appalling.
We are not going to do the victim shaming here. I'm sure she didn't want that when she was part of the Me Too movement. And I think that the sponsorships will return when they see that we are willing to do the right thing.
Caressa Cameron Jackson is referring, of course, to Gretchen Carlson's sexual harassment allegations against then Fox News chairman Roger Ailes. The Miss America pageant has also released a statement saying it supports Cara Mund, but says her letter contains mischaracterizations and unfounded accusations. Shannon.
Trace Gallagher, thank you very much. Now tonight, joining us exclusively, another former Miss America who is adding her name to the call for the entire board to step down. Miss America 2011, Teresa Scanlon joins us. Welcome, Teresa.
Thank you for having me.
I want to read a little bit more of Cara Mund's letter. She said the rhetoric about empowering women and openness and transparency is great. However, the reality is quite different. She went on to talk about being controlled, manipulated, silenced, and bullied. What was your reaction when you saw this letter that she went public asking for other former Miss America's help?
Well, first of all, I found her letter incredibly brave because it's always difficult to speak up when people in power are involved in these situations. And she knows full well, of course, that there may be some backlash or impact against her as the reigning Miss America. And so Cara's letter was really impressive to me because even now we see in some of the statements that the Miss America organization has issued, they are in many ways now blaming her and saying that she should not have spoken up, which is exactly what she was talking about when she referenced being silenced constantly, and it's sad to see that that's just continuing.
And I want to read a little bit more of what Gretchen Carlson, obviously formerly here of Fox News, now chair of the Miss America board, put out a lengthy Twitter statement last night, and part of it she said, "I want to be clear that I have never bullied or silenced you." She went on to talk about what Trace mentioned, their actions have consequences. We've now lost $75,000 in scholarships as a direct result of the explosive allegations in your letter. A lot of folks had a visceral reaction to that, feeling like they are now putting blame on her for speaking up and going public.
Well, that's exactly what I thought when I saw that. I had waited for some time to form my own opinions about this. We had a conference call with Gretchen a couple days ago in which she tried to answer questions that many former Miss Americas had and then released this statement. And while I don't think her intentions are bad, I don't think she's fully understanding the impact of the things that she's saying and doing. So she had initially said that Cara should have come to her privately rather than writing a letter to all of us. And now she's doing the exact same thing, right? She wrote this letter to Cara, but then released it on Twitter, in which she's blaming Cara for things and saying that she needs to support the pageant. So in a way, again, silencing her in the exact way that Cara explained. So when I saw that, it really confirmed for me what's going on here and made me realize that I do need to stand with Cara, and as many former Miss Americas are, to support her in this, and the bravery that it took to come forward and the retribution that she might be facing as well. On Gretchen's side, I love her and respect her as a person, but I think that as a leader right now, she needs to understand the responsibility she has for the impact that her actions and words have caused. And that's very different than having good intentions, because her intentions may be good, but the impact is still there in what Cara's feeling. And she hasn't really accepted that, and I've seen no true apology from her, which is concerning to say the least.
Well, let me read you something a bit snarky, I will admit, from Ellen Sherberg from Biz Woman Journal. She says, this brouhaha between the current Miss America, whose name I admit I never knew, and the reigning pageant executives, including Gretchen Carlson, seems much ado about nothing. Trying to turn a beauty pageant into a socially responsible feminist celebration of womankind always seemed far-fetched to me. By trying to be all things to all women, Miss America went from irrelevant to irritating in less time than it takes to produce another pageant. Full disclosure, from my time as Miss Virginia and as a Miss America finalist, I mean, the money enabled me to go to college and law school with no debt. So I saw a great benefit from it, but it's obviously in a place of a bit of turmoil and transition now. How do you respond to those who say, like, the program's, just not even worthwhile for women anyway?
Well, similar to you, I was very much the same. I won Miss America when I was just 17 years old, and it was prior to college for me, but I completed my undergrad debt-free, and I'm now starting my first year of law school at UC Berkeley. I also joined the Air Force and I'm in the Air National Guard now, and I believe that Miss America empowered me to do all of those things, and I'm doing it all while a single mom. And I don't think that I would have ever had these same opportunities. I've been able to do what I've done in life without Miss America. And while we're not all things to all women, I believe that Miss America is an incredibly vital part of our society for women right now in empowering them, giving them a voice, giving them a platform, providing scholarship money, so many things that sure an outsider might not be able to see, but as someone who competed in the program for years and has had that direct firsthand experience, I know what it's done for my life and the life of thousands and even millions of other women. Yeah, and it's definitely by choice. It's very competitive and selective. It's not for everyone, like you said, but women should have the choice. If this is something they want to do, both of us having benefited greatly, I hope that the program is able to mend these wounds in one way or another and come together and be a positive force for other young women out there. Teresa Scanlon, thank you very much. Thank you for having me. All right, when we return, the latest dust up over claims that social media is censoring conservative posts and videos. Dennis Prager, host of Dennis Prager Radio Show and the founder of PragerU, joins us live with the scoop next. New tonight, a growing number of conservatives are complaining about alleged censorship on Facebook. Most recently, Prager University, a nonprofit conservative educational site, now calling out the social media giant for blocking recent videos and posts from reaching their more than 3 million followers. Facebook says it is all a big mistake, but Prager says that is not the only social media platform that's tried to censor its conservative message. So let's talk to the founder of PragerU, Dennis Prager himself. Great to have you here.
I'm really delighted. Thank you.
Okay, I want to read some of these posts that apparently you guys found out were going nowhere. Right. I mean, you have 3 million followers. None of them were seeing them.
By the way, 3 million followers and 1 billion views this year.
But not on these because they couldn't go anywhere. Right. Baseball represents the best of America. That sounds very treasonous.
And George Will gives it, known to be a hate monger.
I mean, you know, Hollywood can't deny their bias any longer. Why do young people have such a warped concept of America? Israel's right to exist is clear, Alan M. Dershowitz explains, and your kids will respect you once you respect yourself. You guys found out these weren't going anywhere, and that some of your videos were taken down too.
That's right. So this is the latest. First, it began with YouTube, which is owned by Google, and they put now dozens and dozens of our videos. We have about 340 in total. They put them on their restricted list, which means theoretically that it's either pornographic or violent.
Is it either?
Yeah, well, you read the titles. George Will talking about baseball as the American sport doesn't quite meet the definition of pornography or violence. Alan Dershowitz is a lifelong liberal. It doesn't matter to them. If the left doesn't like what you do, they censor you. I need to emphasize this. The issue is tragically, it's that the left doesn't believe in free speech. That is why half of the students in college today, by the Pew poll, they don't believe in free speech for, quote, hate speech, but they declare what's hate speech. We don't have one word of hate. We have a psychiatrist who gives a talk on a UCLA psychiatrist on how to learn to forgive. We have a rabbi giving a talk on not gossiping. This is about as sweet a website, Prager University, as you could find.
It sounds inflammatory, Dennis.
Yes.
I'm not gonna lie. Okay, Facebook statement. They said this: we mistakenly removed these videos and have restored them because they don't break our standards. This will reverse any reduction in content distribution you've experienced. We're very sorry and are continuing to look into what happened with your page.
Okay, look, I'm skeptical, but I want to give them the benefit of the doubt. If they come back to us and say, this is why it happened, and we fired the guy who did it because we understand how bad what was done is, I'll be very impressed. I suspect no one will pay a price at
Facebook for this one.
Facebook, and I suspect that there'll be another mistake in the future. But the larger issue is what is happening at the university is now happening on the internet. Suppression of all non-left speech. And if Americans don't awaken to this, we will lose the unique thing of America, which is free speech.
Yeah, and you talk about those poll numbers. We had some of those on last week, talking about how people on college campuses don't think that the First Amendment should protect, you know, a speech that they find offensive, and that they should have a safe environment. I don't know if they're familiar with the Westboro Baptist gang, who won 8-1 on free speech at the Supreme Court, but I know you have a lawsuit also with Google and YouTube.
That's right.
The judge initially kicked it out. You've got it on appeal, but part of the ruling was that the judge said you can't have a First Amendment case because this isn't a government actor or a state actor. It's a private company.
Well, however, it's the best analogy I can give is if, let's say, Delta or American or United announced we won't allow anybody on who carries the Wall Street Journal on board. Well, they're a private company. They can make their own rules, but everybody understands that when you are the conduit for millions and millions of people, and there are only 3 major airlines, you are not just a private company who has some idiosyncratic rule. And the same thing holds with these people. They control more information than anyone ever controlled in the history of mankind. That's a big deal.
Yeah, and I know you say that while it is personal for you, you're worried about the much broader implications.
Overwhelmingly, that's correct.
Well, you're on appeal to the Ninth Circuit. How do you think your chances are?
I actually think there are chances because the judge in this case did not dismiss the case. We can appeal. She did not say, you know, without prejudice. And likewise, she said it was mere puffery that they claimed that they are open. That was a very big deal. She gave us a leeway. I have said all along, if YouTube, Google, Facebook and Twitter announce we are only receptive to left-wing views, I have no argument. It's the fraud that they claim to be open that is so appalling.
Yeah, well, the Twitter CEO said this weekend that it's about content. It's not about content. It's about actions and other things.
Oh, please. Oh, please.
Well, we'll let him speak for himself. Dennis Prager, I'm glad you made it.
Thanks for having me.
Flight problems and everything. It's good to see you.
Exactly.
All right, up next, Iran feels the effects of tough U.S. sanctions as France pulls the plug on an oil deal. Plus, the Pope speaks out against the clergy sexual abuse scandal. We've got the latest, plus reaction from the Bishop of the Diocese of Pittsburgh.
whatever step it's going to take to help curb this problem, it needs to be done.
Pope Francis is condemning the crime of priestly sex abuse and is also accusing the church of failing the children it was supposed to protect. The letter from the Pope today comes amid new sex abuse scandals for the church in Pennsylvania. Correspondent Brian Yanis takes it from here.
Showed no care for the little ones, we abandoned them. So writes Pope Francis in a 3-page letter in response to last week's Pennsylvania grand jury report alleging the sexual abuse of over 1,000 children by 301 priests over 70 years throughout the state. The leader of the Catholic Church admits the church has delayed implementing zero-tolerance policies, adding no effort must be spared to prevent sexual abuse from happening again, realizing the magnitude and the gravity of the damage done to so many lives. The Pope goes on to beg for forgiveness, but while exceptionally contrite, the letter does not offer any specific reforms moving forward, nor does it hand down any punishments for the abusers. Pennsylvania's Attorney General Josh Shapiro calls the Pope's letter powerful and says he hopes it will convince church leaders to cease their denials and deflections. Pittsburgh Bishop David Zubik says they've made drastic improvements over the past 30 years, and he's pushing back against calls for his resignation.
The Church of Pittsburgh today is different than the Church of Pittsburgh that's recounted in that particular report, because I can say clearly over the course of the last 30 years, we've been a leader in implementing a number of reforms that were meant to protect children and to respond to victims.
The Archbishop of Washington, D.C., Donald Cardinal Wuerl, met with his Council of Priests just hours after the letter's release. Wuerl is accused of protecting nearly 100 abusive priests during his 18 years as bishop in Pittsburgh. Cardinal Wuerl is no longer attending the church's annual World Meeting of Families in Ireland this weekend. He was supposed to give the keynote address in front of the Pope. No explanation was given for his cancellation. Shannon?
Brian Yanis, thank you very much. A rare moment of cooperation despite rising tensions between the U.S. and Turkey. That story tops Where in the World. Turkish authorities announcing the arrest of 2 suspects in connection with the shooting at the American embassy in Istanbul. A statement from the U.S. embassy praised the, quote, fast and professional action of the Turkish government and police, as well as their support and protection. It's a rare moment of solidarity as President Trump continues to battle Turkey over its refusal to release an American pastor accused of helping to plot a coup, charges he adamantly denies. French oil giant Total announcing today it is officially quitting its multi-billion-dollar gas project in Iran as the U.S. implements its first round of tough new sanctions. Car makers PSA, Renault, and Daimler also among those expected to suspend or drop plans to invest in Iran, along with Deutsche Bahn and Deutsche Telekom. And new reforms going into effect today in hopes of rescuing Venezuela's failing economy. President Nicolas Maduro announcing an increase to gas prices and the introduction of a new currency that comes with a 3,000% increase to the minimum wage. Critics say the changes could actually make matters worse. Even without the new reforms, photographers at Reuters photographed just how much everyday items currently cost. Toilet paper would cost 2.6 million bolivars, and a kilogram comes in at about 3 million bolivars. That's carats. Economists at the IMF have warned inflation in Venezuela could hit 1,000,000% this year. Well, First Lady Melania Trump is planning her first official solo trip. She'll be traveling through several African countries in October. Tonight, the First Lady says she is, quote, excited to educate myself on the issues facing children throughout the continent, while also learning about its rich culture and history. Mrs. Trump recently launched a U.S.-based effort focused on the well-being of children. Well, emotional reunions decades after being ripped apart, relatives separated by the Korean War are finally reunited. The joy and tears coming up next.